Foster family mistreated orphan girl, then 200 hellsangels arrived. Neighbors heard it before they saw it, an echoing roar that shook the quiet street. 200 Harleys thundered in unison, chrome blazing under the sun. Inside the small peeling house at the corner, a girl sat trembling in silence. She didn't know yet, but her rescue was already riding her way. At just 6 years old, Harper Cole lost the only person who ever truly loved her. Her mother's laughter, once the light in their tiny home, was silenced by illness that came too fast, too cruel. Harper's father had been gone long before, leaving only memories too faint to grasp. The state called it placement. Harper learned it as being packed into cars with boxes, her life crammed into garbage bags. Foster homes opened their doors like train cars passing through stations. Some gave her a bed but no kindness. Others gave her chores but no meals. Each goodbye left her smaller inside, but Harper was resilient, though no one could see it yet. She carried a worn notebook everywhere, sketching in corners. Her pencil created worlds where she wasn't the forgotten child, where skies stretched wide and safe. By 12, she had learned what adults didn't say out loud. Kids like her were meant to survive, not belong. And yet, even in her quietest moments, she longed for arms that would hold instead of push away. When Harper met the Wilkins family, it felt different at first. Their tidy white house in Crestwood, Indiana, looked like a picture from a magazine. Mrs. Wilkins greeted the social worker with tea. Mr. Wilkins wore a pressed shirt, his voice firm but polite. Their 2 teenage children smiled just enough to convince. The social worker beamed. "This will be a good home, Harper." Harper wanted to believe it. She clutched her notebook tighter, whispering to herself, "Maybe this is it." But behind the painted shutters, truth lived differently. Chores began on her first day. Scrubbing floors, folding piles of laundry, lugging firewood until her arms ached. Meals were smaller for her, while plates overflowed for the Wilkins family. "You're lucky we took you in," Mr. Wilkins reminded her often, his voice booming across the kitchen. The words dug into Harper's heart deeper than hunger ever could. Still, she stayed quiet. She knew what happened when kids complained. Papers got shuffled, homes changed, promises repeated. So she tucked her hurt into drawings. Horses with wings, motorcycles roaring under crimson skies. Paper was the only place she could breathe. Life with the Wilkins turned darker with each week. Mr. Wilkins barked orders like a drill sergeant, never satisfied. Mrs. Wilkins wielded silence as punishment, her cold stare sharper than any slap. And the Wilkins kids? They turned cruelty into sport, mocking Harper's thrift store sweaters, tearing her drawings to shreds. One night, Harper accidentally spilled a glass of milk at dinner. The room went still. Mr. Wilkins slammed his palm against the table so hard the dishes rattled. "Clumsy little burden," he snapped. Harper froze, shame crawling over her skin. No one came to her defense. Laughter from upstairs echoed later while she scrubbed the spill on her knees, tears mixing with soapy water. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "One day, I'll leave. One day." But that vow was swallowed by silence. She carried it like a hidden ember, glowing faintly under layers of exhaustion and bruises. At school, teachers noticed faint marks on her arms. They asked gentle questions. Harper answered with practiced smiles. She knew the system too well. Questions went missing in stacks of paperwork. Her drawings became her only rebellion, fragile proof that she still dreamed. Winter crept into Crestwood with bitter winds. One night, Harper made a mistake. She tucked half a sandwich into her pocket to save for later. Mrs. Wilkins found it. Her face twisted, voice sharp as glass. "Ungrateful thief." She dragged Harper by the wrist, shoved her into the freezing tool shed out back, and locked the door. The darkness pressed against Harper like a weight. She curled into herself, sweater too thin against the icy air. Her breath fogged in shaky clouds as hours crawled. Fingers numb, lips pale, she whispered her mother's name into the dark. "Mom, if you can see me, send me someone, please." Her voice cracked, carried off by the wind that whistled through the cracks. Morning sunlight filtered weakly through the shed's boards. Mrs. Wilkins opened the door with casual indifference. "Get to work," she said, tossing Harper a rag as though nothing had happened. Harper stumbled out, her body stiff, her spirit quieter. But somewhere deep in that silence, the prayer remained, small, fragile, but alive. She clung to it like a thread. because sometimes even a whisper can call storms. At school, Harper's hands trembled as she tried to hold a pencil. Her art teacher, Mrs. Turner, noticed. After class, she placed a sheet of paper on the desk and spoke softly. "Draw." Harper hesitated, eyes darting toward the door. Then slowly she sketched. A girl standing small before a towering wall of motorcycles, chrome gleaming like armor. Mrs. Turner's breath caught. "That's powerful, Harper. Where did this come from?" Harper only shrugged, hugging her sketchbook close. She couldn't explain, but she knew what motorcycles meant: freedom. The road stretched endless, unlike the locked shed or the echoing kitchen walls. At home, cruelty only deepened. One Saturday, Mr. Wilkins forced Harper to shovel snow until her fingers bled through thin gloves. When she stumbled, he sneered, "Pathetic. No wonder no one wanted you." The words landed heavier than the shovel. That night, Harper bandaged her fingers with tissue and tape. When Mrs. Wilkins found her drawings hidden under the mattress, she ripped them to shreds. "Stop wasting time on nonsense. No one cares about your silly dreams." Harper gathered the torn pieces quietly, pressing them to her chest. "Please, send me someone." Across the street lived Mrs. Whitaker, an elderly widow who had learned to watch the world from her kitchen window. She noticed things others missed. She saw Harper lugging firewood alone, shoulders hunched under the weight. She saw her shivering in the cold, too small coat wrapped tightly around her. One afternoon, Mrs. Whitaker called from her porch, her voice warm. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Harper startled, eyes wide, clutching her coat tighter. "I'm fine," she whispered quickly, fear flickering across her face. She glanced at the Wilkins house like a hunted bird. Mrs. Whitaker's chest tightened. She had seen this silence before, in neighbors, in children, in herself long ago. That night, unable to shake the image, she picked up the phone. Her hands trembled as she dialed a number she hadn't used in years. When her nephew answered, his voice was gravelly but steady. "Aunt May," she swallowed. "It's about the girl across the street. She needs help, real help." He listened quietly. Then his voice hardened like steel. "Don't worry, Aunt May, we'll take care of it." She hung up, staring out her window toward Harper's darkened room. Somewhere deep inside she knew something was coming. The next days carried on in cruel routine. Harper hauled logs, scrubbed floors, and endured the sneers of the Wilkins children. Each night she whispered into the dark, clutching scraps of torn paper. "Please, send me someone." One Saturday evening, as the sun dipped low and the air grew heavy, a sound stirred faintly in the distance. At first it was nothing more than a hum, like bees in the far-off fields. Then it grew louder, deeper, rolling like thunder across the horizon. Inside the Wilkins house, Mr. Wilkins barked at Harper to finish scrubbing the kitchen. Harper froze, rag in hand. Her ears caught it, the low, rising rumble. Outside, Mrs. Whitaker stood on her porch, her heart pounding. She recognized the sound before anyone else. The roar of engines, dozens, maybe hundreds. The Wilkins children peered out the window. "What is that?" But Harper's eyes widened, her chest tightening with something she couldn't name. Hope, fear, or both. The ground began to shake. Chrome gleamed on the horizon. 200 Harleys thundered down Willow Lane, engines blazing like a storm finally arriving. The roar grew louder until it drowned every other sound. Neighbors stepped onto porches, shielding their eyes as chrome and leather filled the quiet street. 200 bikers, vests patched with the words "hellsangels," lined both sides of Willow Lane. Their engines idled like growling thunder. Inside the Wilkins house, Mr. Wilkins pushed away from the table, face twisting. "What in God's name?" Harper dropped the rag, hands trembling. She moved closer to the window, eyes wide. At the head of the pack, a tall man with weathered skin and steel-gray hair swung off his Harley. His boots hit the ground with the weight of someone who had seen too much and chosen to fight anyway. Beside him, others dismounted, their jackets catching the fading light. Mrs. Whitaker stood by her porch, clutching her hands together. She had made the call, and now the storm had come. For the first time in her life, Harper saw a power that wasn't against her. It was arriving for her. She pressed her palm to the glass, a fragile heartbeat rising in her chest. The tall biker walked up the Wilkins porch steps, each stride deliberate. He knocked once, heavy, final. The sound echoed through the small house like thunder shaking walls. Mr. Wilkins opened the door, puffing his chest. "You've got the wrong house." His voice cracked at the edges, though he tried to hide it. The biker's gaze was steady, his voice gravel rough. "We're looking for Harper Cole." Silence stretched. Harper froze in the kitchen doorway, heart hammering. Mrs. Wilkins stepped forward, lips tight. "She's not here. You need to leave before I call the police." Behind the tall biker, the street shimmered with engines and chrome. Dozens of men and women stood in silence, arms crossed, their presence louder than words. The biker tilted his head, eyes never leaving Mr. Wilkins. "You think the law scares us? Try mistreating a child in this town again. See how far that gets you." From the corner, Harper's voice broke through, small but clear. "I'm here." Every head turned. Her words, trembling but brave, changed everything for years. Harper's voice had been drowned by silence, by scolding, by laughter not her own. But now, standing in the doorway, she let it rise. "I'm Harper Cole," she whispered, clutching her sketchbook scraps tight. The tall biker's eyes softened. He crouched slightly, leveling with her. "You okay, kid?" Her throat tightened. Words didn't come easy, but she managed one truth. "They hurt me." Gasps rippled through the gathered neighbors. Mrs. Whitaker's hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming silently. Mr. Wilkins tried to step forward, blustering. "She's lying. She's nothing but—" Before he could finish, two bikers moved closer, their presence enough to silence him. The tall biker extended a leather-gloved hand toward Harper. His voice gentled. "You don't have to stay here another night. You ride with us now." Harper hesitated only a moment before reaching out. Her small fingers slipped into his weathered hand. For the first time she felt strength that didn't crush, it carried. And as he led her out the door, 200 engines roared alive in unison, shaking the ground like victory drums. Harper climbed onto the back of the tall biker's Harley. The seat felt foreign yet safe, leather worn smooth by years of roads. He glanced back at her, giving a nod that asked without words, "You ready?" She clutched the sides, whispering, "Yes." The engines thundered and the column of motorcycles began to roll. Neighbors stood frozen, some with tears as the sight unfolded. A fragile girl escorted by an army of chrome guardians. The wind whipped Harper's hair as the town blurred past. For the first time, the horizon didn't look unreachable. It stretched wide, waiting for her. She closed her eyes and pictured her drawings. Endless highways. Wings of steel carrying her away from walls that once trapped her. And now those sketches weren't just dreams. They were real under her fingertips. Behind her, 200 bikers rode in unison, their presence declaring to the world, "This child is not alone." Every mile put distance between Harper and cruelty. And every mile stitched something back together inside her, a quiet belief that maybe she belonged somewhere after all. By nightfall, the convoy reached a sprawling clubhouse at the edge of town. Its neon sign flickered faintly, but inside glowed warmth Harper hadn't known in years. The bikers guided her in gently, voices softer now, as though afraid to break something fragile. One woman with kind eyes offered her a steaming bowl of stew. "Eat, sweetheart." Harper hesitated, unused to kindness without cost. But hunger won. She lifted the spoon, each bite tasting like more than food. It was safety. It was care. Around her, rough hands poured coffee, laughter rumbled, leather jackets creaked. But beneath the noise was a quiet respect. No one mocked, no one sneered. They treated her drawings, what little she saved, as treasures. The tall biker finally spoke. "Name's Ray, folks call me Steel." His gaze held hers steady. "From this day forward, you're not invisible. You're family, family." The word hit Harper harder than any cruelty ever had. Tears stung her eyes, not from pain, but from the shock of finally being seen. And in that clubhouse, surrounded by unlikely angels, Harper's ember of hope began to glow again. The Wilkins didn't let go quietly. Days later, officials arrived, fueled by the family's complaints. But the bikers were ready. Ray stood firm, evidence gathered, photographs of bruises, testimonies from neighbors, Harper's drawings torn to pieces. Mrs. Whitaker testified, her voice trembling but unbreakable. "I saw everything. That child suffered." For once, the system listened. The Wilkins' polished smiles crumbled under scrutiny. Harper's truth, once buried in silence, now filled courtrooms. Through it all, the bikers never left her side. They filled benches, their leather vests a wall of support. Their presence was louder than any lie. When the judge ruled the Wilkins unfit and barred them from fostering again, Harper exhaled a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. It wasn't just freedom from cruelty. It was justice, a crack of light through years of darkness. Afterward, Harper sat outside the courthouse steps, sketchbook open. She drew again, a girl riding on a Harley, the horizon wide open. But this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stretched a road filled with bikes, chrome shining like shields. Her prayer had been answered. In the months that followed, Harper's life shifted in ways she could barely believe. She stayed with Mrs. Whitaker first, her evenings filled with warm meals and gentle questions. The bikers visited often, teaching her the language of engines and highways. Ray took her on short rides, teaching her balance, trust, and freedom. "The road doesn't ask where you came from," he told her one evening, the sunset bleeding red across the horizon. "It just asks where you want to go." At school, kids who once avoided her began to notice her fire returning. She no longer wore the same sweater every day. Her drawings, once torn apart, now hung proudly on classroom walls. Teachers smiled, proud of the girl who had endured so much. Harper laughed again, awkward at first, then louder. Each sound rebuilt something inside her. Though scars lingered, they no longer defined her. They became proof she had survived. Every time she heard the distant rumble of Harleys, her heart lifted. She wasn't the forgotten foster kid anymore. She was the girl the world had fought for. Years later, Harper stood taller, her hair blowing in the wind as she kicked a motorcycle to life. It wasn't just any bike, it was her own, rebuilt piece by piece with the help of the bikers who had become her family. Mrs. Whitaker watched proudly from her porch, tears glistening as engines rumbled once more down Willow Lane. Harper adjusted her helmet, eyes bright. "Ready?" Ray asked, standing beside his Harley, older now but still strong. She smiled, steady and certain. "Always." The convoy roared alive again, the sound echoing across the town that once held her captive. But this time she wasn't a trembling girl behind glass. She was a rider, free and unbreakable, part of something bigger than herself. Her story wasn't about being saved. It was about being seen, about finding strength in unlikely places, about angels who rode on two wheels instead of wings. And as the convoy disappeared into the horizon, one truth lingered in the air. Even the smallest prayer can summon an army, and even the loneliest child can find a family forged in steel. Thank you for watching. If this touched your heart, please subscribe, like, and press the bell icon. Every click helps us bring more stories of resilience and hope. Somewhere out there, another child is waiting to be seen, and maybe your share could help bring them their miracle.